And good morning, Raleigh. I'm really excited, regional area, of course. I'm really excited to be here. And I'm going to ask Susan if you can allow me to share my screen. I want to make sure I can. There we go. Okay. Excuse me 1 second and we'll get started. I'm inviting you this morning to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that is really the invitation that I have for you today. There is no magic bullet for becoming inclusive. It's an ongoing process, and I love this topic. I think it's fabulous how simple it is once you understand some basic tools, and that's what I want to share with you today is simple tools. So I want to make sure everyone can see my screen and that we've gotten on to our first slide. Larry, can you give me a nod if you can see the screen? Okay. All right, great. So we're going to jump right in, and again, let's just get comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's going to be the ticket to getting where we want to go. And we're going to build an unstoppable, inclusive culture because we've got to go beyond fair housing. We understand that there are laws and we are supposed to protect protected classes. We're obligated as realtors to honor fair housing laws, but that doesn't in itself create inclusiveness. And this is where we really start being challenged. And the big question to start with is, does expanding diversity create inclusiveness? And the answer is absolutely not. The intention when we started having a lot of civil rights movement in mid-century, last century, we struggled with how to create equity, and the initial efforts were through quota, whether sending children to school by busing in order to create more of a diverse student body, or in businesses who were required in order to get federal support or state support to have a quota of different diverse members of their communities. And we all understand, if you look at this chart, that adding people to a mix and bringing them in doesn't create inclusiveness. It may create diversity, but it creates a second set of problems that we've seen over the years, which is illustrated here, that leads to division. It doesn't lead to inclusion, even though it was well intended and we absolutely needed that as a start. So where do we go if we're trying to understand why quota in itself, why adding diversity to a group of people doesn't create inclusiveness? We need to understand unconscious bias. And if you've watched the NAR program that's available, it's a 1-hour video that you can learn a lot about unconscious bias. I'm going to breeze through it today, but it's important to touch on it because we all have to come to an agreement for us to move forward in this conversation that we all are biased. And I'm going to suggest that being biased unconsciously is not a bad thing necessarily. If we see a tiger in the middle of the road and it's not chained up, we don't spend any time thinking about, is that tiger safe or not? Our unconscious bias will kick in. This is dangerous. I need to get out of the way. It's how we've survived for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. How? Our minds, once we start recognizing things, we categorize them as good or bad. If you burn your hand on an iron, you will be very careful when you handle an iron, and it doesn't necessarily require you to warn yourself every time you reach for an iron. That's also unconscious bias. It's the way our unconsciousness works for self-protection, and that is the mode that is internal in us, is survival. So my answer to this question, are you biased? Absolutely, we all are. And is all unconscious bias bad? No, it actually is a wonderful part of being a human being. Welcome to the human race. If you are not biased, you wouldn't survive. It's not possible. So what happens though with unconscious bias that creates difficulty in our lives, and particularly in today's society, is when we start labeling things as good or bad, and we don't stop to think about whether that label is accurate or not. And we put people in categories very quickly. Again, good, bad, safe, unsafe, stranger, friend. And we even teach children, don't talk to strangers. They are not safe. The inherent message there is people we don't know are unsafe. So it's not surprising as we grow older, depending on how we're raised and what experiences we have that contradict that, that we start labeling things and people as good or bad that may not be accurate as adults when we first learned that piece of information. You see a lot of language here. One of the things that we're seeing a lot in our culture is political diversity, and it's actually divisive because everyone is taking a very strong stand on their point of view. At least that's what we think. And so you'll hear people who are Democrats calling Republicans deplorables, and you'll hear Republicans calling Democrats snowflakes. As soon as we put a label on someone, and this isn't the majority of people, but it's the majority of what we see on social media and in the news, and the loudest noise is what we're recognizing, and we start seeing these labels have a lot more power than they deserve. And what they do is they stop the conversation. As soon as somebody hears the language, oh, don't be a Karen, or you're practicing white privilege, those are labels that tell that person when they hear it that they've been put in a box, they are not good, and then they feel they need to defend their action or explain away their behavior. Same thing with any of the language, deplorable, snowflake, all of the languages that you see, and there are plenty of words that I could have shared that are in our culture that immediately stop conversation. Calling a teenager a thug is not going to invite, they're not going to be inviting towards you to hear anything you have to say. They know what you think about them immediately. So what words we use are really important, and part of the invitation today is to take the label away and look at the behavior. So when we're trying to work through things, whether it's in ourselves or other people, we're not judging the entire person, we're just looking at that one behavior. So we're going to talk a little bit about marginalization. Anytime that you felt less than, and part of the reason for thinking about this for a minute is to put yourself in a position of recognizing how other people could feel the same way. And if you've been marginalized at school, if you've been marginalized in your family, maybe socially, where you were snubbed and not invited to go to a party or an event that was important to you. Maybe you weren't tapped on the shoulder for a leadership opportunity, something that was significant to you. If there are times when you have felt less than the people around you, hold that thought, because everything else we talk about is going to require empathy and putting yourself in someone else's shoes. And if you can hold marginalization and that experience in your own life, you'll be able to understand what we're trying to accomplish today, interacting with other people. So I'm hoping that you have seen the Long Island Divided study that was done by Newsday. This was a 3-year process where they had undercover people that were hired. They weren't really testers. These were people who were actors who were hired to play the role of a buyer, and they went into the same realtor twice. One who was a diverse member of society, and the other who was a white member of society. These people came into the same realtor. It was within a 1-month period. It had to be accomplished. The details for each of the people were very, very similar. They had the same budget to spend. They described the same property. They asked for an opportunity to see very similar houses in similar neighborhoods. Without exception, other than 2 firms in all of Long Island, every single firm failed with their realtors in how they treated the customers who came in the door. And it wasn't obvious. The way they determined this was they brought the people in who had tested or acted out their role, and they sat together and talked about their experience. An African American woman or a Hispanic woman, for example, would say, when I came in, I was asked to show my driver's license. I was asked to show proof of a loan before they would take me out in the car to see the property. And this was all videotaped. The white person, the agent, immediately said, what do you want to look at? Let's go, and did not ask for the same things. Now, those 2 people had no idea that the African American woman was discriminated against until you looked at the videos side by side. And it was because the processes were not the same, and unconscious bias was very active within each of those realtors. And I would argue that you could do the same study anywhere across this country and probably have a very similar result. I don't think that, I live in Nashville, and I'm pretty confident that if they did a double test like this, where you're not doing a testing and just asking fair housing questions, but you're actually sending in 2 different people with the same realtor, I think we'd have very similar results. And it's worth asking, would this happen in Raleigh as well? Could you pass this double-blind test? And if you haven't seen this study, this is the Long Island Newsday.com. You can go to their site, look up the Realtor study, and pull it up. There's videos. You can watch them for yourself, read it. It will take several hours to really go through it, but it's eye-opening, and it challenges all of us to consider, if we have processes in place where we are treating every single person who wants to interact with us as realtors in the same way, and having the same requirements, and showing them the same level of respect. So when we're talking about how do we overcome this, how do we overcome bias, how do we make sure that we are truly treating people the same, the first place we can start is in our emotional intelligence, or EQ. So what is that? Your EQ is measurable by several aspects, and what's wonderful about emotional intelligence is you can improve it, and it's actually been shown. You can look up studies online. There are so many of them through universities and businesses that show that emotional intelligence, having a high score, is more indicative of your ability to be successful in your career, in your relationships, and how you interact in the world. So there's 4 aspects to it. 2 of them are internal and 2 are external. The first is self-awareness, and becoming aware of what you think and do, how you behave, including unconscious bias, and just noticing and understanding who you are and why you do what you do. And then the second piece of internal aspect of emotional intelligence is, are you able to self-regulate your behavior? Can you analyze your unconscious bias? Can you analyze how you interact with other people and adjust and manage whether you're upset or disappointed or angry? It's self-control. And then the other piece of that would be motivation. What motivates you, and are you able to be self-motivating, or do you need external motivation in order to be inspired to produce? And then the other 2 pieces are internal. The first is, external, how you interact with other people. The first piece is empathy. Empathy is compassion, and where we were talking about our own experience with marginalization. If we can recall our own situations and have empathy for other people, and then express compassion through our behavior and respect for people, that would be a key component of empathetic behavior. And the other piece, of course, are social skills. How well do you interact with other people? Do you consider them and make them feel welcome and work for a win-win relationship? So those are the 4 components of emotional intelligence. And today we're going to focus on empathy. And I love this quote. I have edited it to be more inclusive, and it's all it takes for evil to succeed is for good people to do nothing. And we're going to talk a little bit about empathy in action. And of course, we know the golden rule, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And when we talk about empathy in action, I know it's hard to know, how do I express that in a physical, visible way so that someone understands that I'm empathizing while we're interacting? So treating them the way you would want to be treated is tone. Are you speaking in a respectful tone? Is your voice raised, or is it even and smooth? Are you relaxed in your conversation? Body language. Body language is so important in terms of how people see us. Are our arms crossed? Are we closed off? Are we leaning away from them? Are we looking over their shoulder during a conversation, which leads to being present? People are aware when we become disengaged or distracted. We've all been at an event and there's a lot going on. Someone is speaking with us and we look over their shoulder and somebody catches our eye, they wave at us, and then we go back to the conversation and try to pretend as if it didn't happen. Truth is, we all know when someone gets distracted, and part of our goal, if we really want to overcome just keeping diversity at bay and really become inclusive, it's showing respect for the other person. And in that instance, it would be acknowledging the truth, where we become uncomfortable to help someone else be comfortable. For example, I'm sorry, I was distracted just then and I missed what you said. Could you please repeat it? It's really important to me that I hear what you have to say. Boom, you've shown them respect, you've acknowledged your foray over their shoulder, and you've brought it right back to, hey, you're important, and I just realized that I was distracted, and I want to acknowledge that. We become uncomfortable. Apologizing is putting ourselves in discomfort to make someone else feel better, and for us to acknowledge the truth, and we all are aware when it happens. So when it happens and we're the party that's been distracted, it's completely honorable, it's empathetic, and it shows great respect for the person you're speaking with. And responding appropriately to someone's emotion. If there's a lot of intensity and anger and energy going on and you're uncomfortable with it, it's a good idea to say, I'm really uncomfortable with how angry you are right now. I struggle with this. I want to hear what you have to say, but I'm not feeling safe. I'm not feeling comfortable. I'm not hearing anything beyond your anger. Could we talk a little bit later when you've had a chance to think through what you want to say? And I want to respect that you're angry and you're not happy about this situation, but I need to get to a place where I can really hear what you have to say. And right now, all I can hear is your anger. Again, it's honoring where they're at without saying they're right or wrong. It's being present in the moment and speaking your own truth and setting a healthy boundary, of course, if you don't feel safe, but doing it in a respectful way and ideally showing empathy for someone else's feelings, even if you don't agree and even if you are not going to be able to solve it for them. So when we're talking about an ongoing process, actually doing this activity and practicing it is going to help us all become stronger and more inclusive by our behavior and practicing it. So how do we do that? Our first tool is so simple. It's being curious. If we slow down our thinking and we question our viewpoint, just start wondering, could I be wrong? Is there more to this story? If we find ourselves finishing someone's sentence for them or interrupting them because we know where they're going. Taking the time to slow down and let them finish their thought and question our viewpoint. Am I missing something? Seeking the opinion of others. Hey, do I interrupt a lot? Am I someone who isn't really giving you a good hearing? Do you feel understood by me? Particularly in our closer relationships, we tend to do this more frequently. But even in social settings, there are people that we tend to disregard and interrupt. And if we start watching other people, and if we admire someone for the way that they're inclusive and make people feel like they're the most valuable person on the planet when they're speaking with them, emulating their behavior, asking questions. How did you come to this style of interacting with people? What's your secret about being inclusive? And then the other piece to this is making sure that we're noticing when we're making decisions that favor or disregard others. There's always going to be people that we don't feel comfortable with or like. We're human beings. We like things. We don't like things. We like people. We don't like people. We're all unique. But if we're favoring some people consistently and other people, anything that they say, we're already discounting because we put them in a box and we've labeled them as unimportant. I encourage you to just take a look at that and consider, are you disregarding groups of people or individuals unfairly? And is it an unconscious bias that you have? Is this person somebody, maybe you disregard people who are overweight, that you tend to think certain things about them and don't consider their opinion as important. Inclusiveness is considering everyone and every single situation as an opportunity to show respect, not necessarily agreement. So when we talk about diversity, I want to open this up. This isn't just about race, even though it seems to be the topic right now because of all that's going on in our society. And it's really important, if we're going to be inclusive, that we start understanding that diversity is everyone and every single human being is unique. And if we quit labeling and we start understanding how many categories we can place people in, it's very easy to see why we label and then start disregarding other people as maybe not being as important as people we favor who are more like us. So I've got a list of items on here. We're seeing a lot of religious and political conflict right now. I would encourage you to consider that diversity is political differences, and that's not a skin color, it's not visible, but it's really important to understand if we cut off half of our relationships or consider anyone who is named that political party idiots or snowflakes or deplorables, we've just cut out relationship with that person because we've defined them as less than. And that is the kiss of death to building an inclusive relationship with anyone. So a couple things that can trigger bias in us when we're running behind, when we're in high pressure situations, when we see people as less than, like, for example, in a grocery store, in a restaurant, there are plenty of instances where we've seen people disrespect people who are waiting or serving the customer. And we tend to do this when we're in a bigger hurry, as you're just in my way. I need you to do what I need in order to get where I'm going. And people become less important than accomplishing a task. That tends to trigger subconscious bias because our mind is just going to be clicking, putting things in boxes so we don't have to spend time on it if it's not important to us. So when we're distracted, when we're driving down the road and we're in a rush, are we rude to other people? Inclusiveness is saying, you know what, everybody on the road is important and I need to treat them with courtesy. So that golden rule really does apply to inclusiveness. And we can also, even when we've got great stuff going on, our emotional state can drive how we treat people. And it's really important, whether we're having a tough time or a really positive time, to slow down enough to pay attention to the people around us and make sure that they feel welcome and included. I want to say something here that I hope you will take to heart. Our biases do not always reflect our values. For some people, it does. Overtly racist or bigamist or, misogynist people, that may be how they prefer to see the world, and that does reflect their values. The majority of us, on the other hand, when we have unconscious biases, it doesn't always reflect our heart or how we want to relate to other people. And I think in this journey, it's really important, if you want to go through this process and improve, to give yourself grace and a break, and to also give other people the benefit of the doubt and grace and a break, and understand we are where we are, we can improve, we can change, but X marks the spot. This is where we are. Be kind with ourselves. We're becoming more aware, and as we become more aware and make choices, we'll improve. And of course, ideally, we'll give other people the benefit of that doubt as well. So the second tool we're going to talk about is retraining our mind. Again, very simple, but powerful opportunity to change how you include other people in your life. The first is, if you have an unconscious bias that you're now aware of about a group of people, let's say Muslims, and you haven't interacted with any Muslims within your community, it would be awesome to go to a Muslim event and learn more about their culture or their food. Larry was sharing with me earlier that they were working on an opportunity to have a variety of foods as a mixer, so people could learn more about the cultures that are available in Raleigh to learn more about. Brilliant idea, because it creates new experiences. You start connecting with those people who are providing the food and sharing a little bit about their own culture, and that creates new experiences, and then they're no longer strangers and can become friends, and you become more inclusive and see people as intriguing and generate some curiosity instead of putting them in that box. So creating your experiences, and if you have a bias that's very strong, find counterexamples when you discover those biases. And the way you can discover some of your own biases is to take an implicit association test. Now, these are free and online. Most universities offer them because it's part of the social behavioral studies that they do. And you will be part of helping them gather more information for the education of their students and to provide study results. So these implicit association tests or implicit bias tests, you can pick the topics that you're interested in just by Googling. Let's say obesity is something that you absolutely, anyone you know who is obese, you tend to avoid. I'm just giving you an example. If you go online, you can find an obesity implicit bias association test and see where you are on that test as far as your unconscious biases. And then you can test yourself in a year and see if you've improved, and you can work on retraining your mind to see people as individuals and not label them. So I already mentioned this, I'm going to mention it again. Limiting your judgment to observing your behavior and other people's behavior with detachment, and choosing your course of action, giving yourself and others grace. It is so important through this process. We're all in it together. We're all flawed, and labeling people and being angry with them for not knowing what they don't know won't help them. And it's the same with you. If you don't know you have the bias, you can't make a choice to think differently. Once you know that you have the bias, then you have the opportunity to change or not change. So when we talk about key bias triggers, one of the things we need to be really careful about is simplistic solutions that create new biases. And of course, that was the quota example I gave you earlier, which was a great starting point, but it diminishes people to filling a seat based on their skin color, their ethnicity, their sexual orientation, their age, whatever those key desired components are, making sure that we don't stop at quota and we recognize, yes, we want to have an African American and we want to have a Latinx at the table, but we don't want to make it about they are now speaking for all Black or all Latin or Hispanic members of the association. They are unique, they have a unique perspective, and you want their voice at the table. But then the quota piece is just the beginning. It's got to go way past that to help people feel valued and respected. So that myopic viewpoint of just seeing them as the group that you're trying to represent, it's really important to get past that, to include it, but get past that into deeper valuing of the people that you're inviting to the table. When we talk about bias triggers in our own lives, and whether we're in meetings or we're working with clients or we're meeting someone new, family situations, bias triggers happen in a variety of ways. And I'm going to assume a meeting or a board meeting for this description to kind of give you ideas of how this might work. An affinity bias is when we want everyone and we feel close to people who think like we do. An affinity bias is just that natural attraction that we have to people who are most like us. It's not something we manufacture, we don't work at it, we're just drawn to certain people, and usually it's because we have certain things in common or they have a trait that we greatly admire. So an affinity bias is a trigger that we want to address. Halo effect. Halo effect is, you know, movie stars and heroes and people who can do no wrong, and we're completely devastated when they fall from grace socially because we put them up on a pedestal. A halo effect also is a label, and it limits our ability to see that person as a real human being. If we have a confirmation bias, we're looking for people who think like we do, and we're asking for them to support our viewpoint, even if we don't do it verbally. Confirmation bias we see all the time on Facebook, where people will post something political or socially relevant that is a very specific point of view. They are not looking for people to contradict them. They're looking for people to confirm their point of view. If they find articles, if somebody were to paste an article under that post and say, hey, what you posted isn't accurate, here's an article that says blah, 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 they'll put 5 more articles that contradict that article because they're not looking for new information. They're looking to have their point of view confirmed. The challenge with that is when we want our viewpoint confirmed, we're not listening, we're not considering other points of view, we're not curious about whether we have alternative options to how we think. We just want to feel good about what we think, and we want other people to defend us. And if they don't, people quit being friends with people who have a different point of view. People attacked. You'll see a lot of, if one person has an alternative viewpoint, you'll see everyone in the group who has that confirmation bias with the poster attack that person. And that goes to groupthink. Groupthink is what happens in a riot where 1 or 2 people instigate and people get frenzied up and start following. It's what happens when a group of teenagers raped someone, and when they're interviewed later, there was one ringleader who goaded everyone typically, and they all became frenzied and got caught up, and afterwards there's remorse and shock and they don't understand why they did it. And we need to be really careful about participating in groupthink where we're following the energy of the group without conscious decision about the wisdom of it. And of course, the younger we are, the more likely we are to be drawn in, whether younger in age or in mental maturity, because it's easier to get stirred up and drawn into wanting to be part of the crowd and be accepted. Groupthink is also when you're in a meeting and there are 3 or 4 drivers in that board meeting, and everyone else waits to hear what they have to say before they'll express an opinion because they don't want to be shot down. And the unconscious agreement in that meeting is that those 3 or 4 people, or maybe even one person, is controlling the thought for the rest of the group, which is groupthink. So how do we take action in this instance? Well, the real key to this is recognizing individuality, and that's not just us as individuals, but if we are leading a group, if we are parenting, if we are part of a social group, or we're leading clients, it's really important to see the individuality of every single person we're interacting with. We avoid groupthink or allowing people to not contribute their own viewpoint if we recognize individuality and reach out and ask open-ended questions instead of yes or no, instead of a leading question that says, we all agree, da 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 da, which tells everyone what you really want them to say. If you're chairing a committee, it is vital to ask for people whose opinion may not be expressed because they have an opposing viewpoint, asking open-ended questions. Does anyone here have a suggestion or an idea that hasn't been brought up? We've had 4 or 5 people agree with the original idea. I'd love to hear opposing viewpoints so we make sure that we haven't missed any unintended consequences of this decision. Please share now. We want to hear it. We really want to make a good decision for this committee, for this association, for this homeowners association, school board, whatever it is you're participating in. Asking open-ended questions helps a lot. When you reject oversimplistic conclusions, we avoid new biases. For example, if we've met one Muslim and never interacted with anyone else and they're wonderful, maybe before we thought all Muslims were terrorists, and now we know one Muslim, so we say, oh, no Muslim is a terrorist. Oversimplistic biases, we end up creating new ones. It's really important that we stick to recognizing individuality in every situation so we don't end up recreating new unconscious biases that slow us down. And we can talk about it when we struggle with a bias. It's okay to acknowledge, again, being uncomfortable so that other people feel comfortable. You know, I've never met a Muslim before. I feel really awkward. I don't know anything about your culture. Would you tell me a little bit about it? Those are the kinds of things you can do that will open the door, which is that curiosity and retraining your brain, but then it's also respecting the individuality of the person in front of you and acknowledging that you're uncomfortable. And now we're going to talk about the action in meetings. How do we take action? And we take action by asking everyone to participate. We recognize individuality by going around the table and acknowledging each person. We recognize individuality by attributing contributions to the right person. For example, Mary brings up an idea and she may not be as well respected as someone else at the table. So Mary brings up an idea and then Martha interrupts her halfway through and says, yeah, that's a great idea. I've been thinking about that a lot too. And here's what I think we should do, and carries the idea further. If you're chairing the committee, it's appropriate to say, great idea, Martha. Mary, were you finished with what you were sharing, or did you want to finish that thought? If you're at the table and there's no clear leader, or the chair isn't aware or of how to handle this situation, it's okay as a member of the table to say, love the idea, Martha. I'm not sure Mary was finished. Hey, Mary, would you finish what you were saying? I want to make sure I understand your idea. And again, it's acknowledging that person and giving credit back to them for generating the idea and not letting it be hijacked by someone who might be a little stronger speaker or more respected or more dominant at the table. Making space for others. This is such a simple thing to do. When we're out, again, I hope we are soon because I miss hugging everybody. It's really tough to do virtual living. But when we're back out in social groups on the ground and interacting, and we're standing in a circle talking, maybe it's a mixer or some kind of an event, and someone comes up to the circle and they're standing near you, the simplest thing you can do is step back a step. You don't have to acknowledge them other than nodding your head, allow the speaker to not be interrupted, but just step back so that there's space for them in the group. And I encourage you to do this whether you like the person or not, whether you know them or not. They are silently requesting acceptance, and you can either diminish their value to the group by not acknowledging them, because everybody notices when this happens subconsciously, at least, and you've honored that person. It doesn't mean that you like them. It doesn't mean that you're their best friend. It doesn't mean that you're going to get drawn into a long conversation. All it means is you've acknowledged them as a human being and you've made space for them. It's such a simple thing to do, and if you want to be an inclusive person, it is the fastest way you can show somebody is valuable. Same thing at a table. If you're sitting in a group and someone comes up and stands and there are chairs nearby, invite them to pull up a chair or slide your chair back so that they can be part of the group if there aren't chairs available. Seeking alternative viewpoints on purpose. I've expressed that earlier. And then we're going to talk about microaggression. How do we address that constructively, and what is it? Before we get into microaggression, this bonus tip is really, really key, and that is listen as if you could be wrong. Listen as if you don't know what the end of the sentence is. You'll never interrupt another person again or finish their sentence if you ask yourself, what if I could be wrong? And that's not where they're going. Sometimes you'll be surprised and sometimes you won't, but you will be treating someone with respect and you'll be including them. So, microaggression, what is it? They're everyday slights, put downs, insults. People feel marginalized when we treat them with microaggression. Most of the time, it's not intentional. Sometimes it is. We call it bullying when it is, but a lot of times people are labeled as bullies or bullying behavior, and they don't realize they're doing it. And I would encourage you to consider, are there ways that you bully by diminishing the value of someone else through your behavior? And I've given you a couple of examples here, but the key to it is if someone feels ashamed or dehumanized, it's a form of microaggression, whether it's verbal or nonverbal. So I'm going to speak very briefly about people who are disabled and give you an example of microaggressions and how they're received by the people who are disabled, that community, and some of the requests that they have to feel respected in ways that you can include them. Talking directly to them, even if they are severely disabled, speaking their name and acknowledging them will touch the person who is their caregiver. But a lot of times people in wheelchairs, if they have an assistant, that assistant is treated with respect. And even if that person is a professor or a congressperson or someone of very high intellectual stature, they tend to be ignored and talked right over as if they can't think for themselves. Or they're shouted at as if they can't hear. Speak in a normal tone of voice unless someone asks you to speak louder. Ask before you help. Assume that their equipment is an extension of them. Don't lean on it, sit on it, unless you're invited to do that. And their necks hurt. If they're in a wheelchair, they're looking up at people all day. If it's possible, pull a chair up and sit down or squat down eye level so that they have the sense of respect and give their neck a rest. If someone is visually impaired, it is important to acknowledge them, let them know you're there immediately. And then also, whether someone is visually impaired, handicapped, disabled, whatever their disability is, if you shake hands in a circle and they are in that circle, put your hand out to shake their hand. Most people don't do it because they feel uncomfortable, they feel awkward. And again, I'm going to invite you to be uncomfortable to make someone else feel comfortable. You put the hand out. If they can't shake your hand, they will tell you, I can't shake your hand, but I fist bump, or I shoulder bump, or I do hugs, or whatever it is. Let them tell you. And if someone doesn't shake your hand because it's a cultural thing, whatever their circumstance is, accept that they didn't shake your hand and say, put your hand out, and they say, I don't shake my hand because in our culture, men don't touch a woman that is a stranger to them. Say, oh, tell me about your culture, instead of taking it as an affront to your feminism and your business acumen. In that moment, consider their comfort more important than your embarrassment and ask a question. Be curious, retrain your mind to not take offense, and treat them as an individual with respect and ask the question, tell me more. If someone is blind and you put your hand out, say, my hand is at your 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 12 o'clock, wherever it is in relation to their belly button. Kind of give them, hopefully not 6 o'clock, but give them the opportunity to shake your hand as well. It will go very far in letting them know that you respect and value them as a human being. So microaggressions in a meeting. I'm sure most of us have done this or will do this, talking over someone or interrupting them, finishing their thought, taking over an idea. Examples during networking, I talked about not opening a space. It's a microaggression to not allow someone into a group. It is a statement that they are less than, and that's how it's received. Body language, when you open the group or when you're speaking to somebody, turning your body toward them, opening the group with your shoulders so that it's very clear that they're welcome. Not introducing someone to the rest of the group. A way that we can avoid embarrassment because we don't remember their name is to simply not bring it up or introduce them. Alternatives are, hey everyone, do you know each other? Or, I'm sorry, I have met you a dozen times, I respect your work and blah, 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 and your name is escaping me and I want to introduce you to the rest of the group. Would you please introduce yourself, and I will work really hard to remember your name in the future. That's about me being uncomfortable so they feel comfortable and know that it's about my limit and not their value. So key stuff, what's next? Well, we need to be relentless about uncovering our unconscious biases if we want to change, with mercy and grace toward ourselves and other people. Take action to help others, but at the same time, nobody needs a savior or a counselor. Make sure that you ask if they need help before you jump in to defend or stand up for them. Apologize frequently when necessary. I think I apologize every single day. The more I practice, the more I know I don't know. And it's definitely a work in process experience. Modeling inclusive behaviors in language, asking questions and explain why you're asking. I want to know more about cultures. I want to be a more inclusive person, and I'd love to know more about you. And then if you're running a firm or an office or a family or a homeowners association or a committee, create inclusive policies. Work through how are you going to be more inclusive to the people who are already at the table, and how can you make more people feel welcome so that they want to join you at the table. We've got reference materials that are everywhere. The first piece I want to share with you is Grovo. They have online free training videos on diversity inclusion that are very short. They're 3 to 5 minutes. Some of them are 7 minutes long, and they go into every single topic, help you understand and define different areas and aspects of inclusiveness that you can focus on. Absolutely free. They've made them available because they have a passion for developing an inclusive society. Also at NAR, there is the wonderful training video that just came out. It's a 1-hour video that you can see either on NAR, and it may be on your local website. I didn't ask, so I apologize, Larry, for that. If you want to learn more about NAR's stance on bias and diversity inclusion, it's a great video, has a lot of good information in it. And you did hear from Larry earlier that in September, you're going to have an opportunity to get a certification for free of At Home with Diversity, and that was September 22nd. It's an all-day, I think 6 hours in order to get that certification. It's wonderful that your association is offering it for free. It is a lot to do with fair housing and how to stay out of hot water, similar to what the Long Island folks went through. But to have it offered for free is really a terrific benefit for you, and I encourage you to take advantage of that. And then, of course, there's so many books, tapes, and videos. The ones I've chosen are more focused on general concepts. If you want and find that you're struggling with racism or sexism or ageism, there are so many books on those topics where you can really delve in. You can do that intrinsic bias testing to find out where you need to focus. And then if you really want to just start with the basics, I don't know if you can see my little arrow here down on the lower right, Emotional Intelligence 2.0. This is a wonderful little workbook. It is also an audio book, if you prefer, that asks questions at the end of each chapter and helps you build emotional intelligence, or your EQ. It's fabulous. I've gone through it 3 times. I learned something new every time, and my answers change. So I really encourage you to choose that book, but there's so many great business books, so many wonderful topics. So all of these books I also recommend, and I'll share this information and the links with your association so you guys can have those references. So we've worked through our first hour to give you a foundation of tools you can use. Be curious, retrain your mind, recognize individuality, and of course your bonus, listen as if you could be wrong. So we're going to take a 5-minute break and give everybody a chance to run to the restroom or grab some coffee, make a phone call, and then we'll invite you back in 5 minutes, which will be at 10:06. Actually, that would be 11:06 your time. I'm in Nashville. And that'll give us time to set up, and then we'll get everybody on video for the next segment. Thank you.
Yes, actually, I would. Thank you very much. I can't figure out how to do the video, but we are honored to be a part of this, sponsoring this series. And it's a very important in this day and age, and it's very important in every day and age. And we're excited that it's being addressed now. You guys are doing a great job at bringing a lot of things to the forefront, as is Truist, as well as we've had many corporate town halls and a lot of virtual town halls in order to discuss a lot of these same things. And I applaud the association on doing that. And Truist is the combination of BB&T and SunTrust, who have merged as of December of last year. And we are now called Truist, but we are operating independently until we can have full integration. So you're going to hear more from BB&T over time, and they're going to be called BB&T now Truist, and I'm part of SunTrust now Truist. But over time, it will just be Truist, and we're happy to be a part of this session. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, David, for being sponsor of this event and sponsor of our other diversity events. Thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you on other Zooms as we make this happen. Thank you.
Terrific. So I'm seeing a couple people. What I'm wondering is, Susan, do you think it's possible to promote the 6? We're going to need 6 volunteers plus a scribe for this next session. If we could get 6 hands to go up, and a scribe would be the next choice. If Susan, you could promote them to panelists. And unfortunately, we're going to have to go with you guys on microphone raising your hands in between where you can ask a question, and we'll watch for your hand raise, which I believe is one of your choices. Let me make sure that's accurate.
Let's see.
So we're looking for 6 people to promote to panelists to be our examples and work through the exercises. We've got 3 5-minute exercises. So Larry has his hand up. We need, Susan, if you can find our 6, and we'll get that going. We kind of need to grab folks pretty quickly so that we can focus on this programming. So if you'll raise your hands pretty quickly or unmute yourself and volunteer, that would, I've got 2 participants who have raised hands. Let me find them.
Where did you go? There you go. Okay.
We've got 3 so far.
Okay. All right, will you call out their names and make them panelists?
So we've got Leslie Williams. We've got Audra Holland. We've got Denise. I don't want to chop up your name here. Lisdell.
Yes.
We've got.
I think
I know
Larry
Sharon's
had
in there
raised his
somewhere.
hand. Okay. So Larry was 1.
Sharon's in here.
Okay. And Sharon. So do we need 1 more, or do we have 6?
We've got 1,
2, 3, 4, 5.
4, 5.
Need 1
We need
more.
1 more.
Mhm.
Can I volunteer Lewis to be our 6th panelist?
Well, thank you, Cher. I was going to sit back and enjoy and watch and learn. But
Well, you're going to show them how it's done, and I think that'll be wonderful. And then Teresa, would you mind being our scribe today, Teresa Pitt?
is that Teresa Pitt laughing? I can tell.
So that's a
Yes.
yes. Yay, her hand is up. So if you'll make her a panelist as well, then we'll have everyone else. You can mute and unmute during the rest of the exercises, but that way everyone can see everyone in the group. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to get moving pretty quickly. It is a fast exercise, but we'll have 3 segments to it. So I've got, where is, I don't see Teresa on a screen. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Can you make her a panelist so she'll show up on video?
She is a panelist.
Okay. Are you on video, Teresa? There you are. Okay.
Yeah,
good.
I had to rejoin for some reason, and it canceled everything.
Okay, great. So I'm going to share my screen, and then first I want to thank each of you for cheerfully and fully committing and volunteering. This is going to be a lot of fun, and you are going to illustrate for the rest of the members how this process works and how you can come to working together to become more inclusive. So I'm going to share my screen here, and you can now see this sheet, correct? Everybody can see it? Okay, good. And I can see all of you. And I'm going to get Teresa. Okay, I've got all of you on here. So I'm going to remind everyone who is watching that these are the tools that they're going to be working on during this process, and think about how they can utilize them in solving some questions. So we're going to use some of your tools, which is be curious, retrain your mind, recognize individuality, and listen as if you could be wrong. So that's where we're going to start. And let me find out what just happened. Get this back up. I'm not sure why it's challenged, but we'll get there. And thank you for your patience. Okay, so we've seen this. Everybody can see it now, correct? Just give me a little nod of the heads. Okay, so 6 volunteers and 1 scribe. Teresa, your job as the scribe is to keep a list of your volunteers, to note details, and if there's a situation where someone needs to be reminded as we move forward who has spoken or things like that, you can help with it. So it's important for you to have a list of your 6 volunteers and to note the details. You can do shorthand when someone makes a suggestion. Keep track of all the suggestions because it's going to be your role to read them back. And these are the ground rules for everyone. And I want to make sure that we're all in agreement, both the people participating and then the people listening. You're going to be able to give comments and observations. I'm going to ask that they be constructive and non-judgmental, that our goal is to practice and learn, and it is to be supportive and treat everyone with courtesy and respect, not have anybody walk out of here feeling less than by any stretch of the imagination. They have no idea. These panelists don't know what they're going to be asked. Does anybody know anything? No. Okay. So you're going to be volunteering to serve on behalf of your members in order to give an example of how simple this process is and that we're all imperfect and we all work through it, and it's okay to make mistakes as we work through being more inclusive. So our first exercise, you have 5 minutes. It is your job to choose a leader, choose one of 3 topics, which I'm going to show you in a second, and create 3 examples of this behavior. You don't have to solve the problem, you just need to create 3 examples. And you can have dozens of examples, whatever you can accomplish in 5 minutes. Hence the popcorn concept is it's got to move fast, make sure everybody's ideas get out. And then you're going to choose your top 3 examples during this 5-minute period. Okay, so here are your instructions. You're going to choose one of these topics as a group. You have to choose your leader, choose one of these topics that you'd like to focus on, and then create 3 examples of behaviors for your topic of choice. I'm going to start a timer and going to ask for support in time as well. I will interrupt you in the middle of a thought, so please do not be offended. We're going to keep on target because we started a little late, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time who's on the call today as much as we can. So go. Teresa, you do not interact other than gathering information and keeping track of who speaks.
I think Leslie is a great leader.
Agree.
I concur, agree.
I agree.
All right.
I vote yes.
So the next step, right, is that we choose our topic.
Yes.
Yes.
2. Is anybody, is there any, I'm looking at number 2 as an option for the group, or does anyone else have any comments?
I'm comfortable with any 3 of those.
Mm-hmm.
Me too. I like that idea.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we go with number 2?
Yes.
All right, okay. And so now we have to create 3 examples of behaviors, okay, for the chosen topic. Okay, so we're going, so you want to just shoot out ideas of examples?
Mm-hmm.
So an example would be let's say we were in the meeting, and then there was, you know, one idea that sort of came up. So do we role play this, or do we just share? How do we do that? Do we role play this, or do we just give written examples?
Leslie, you're the leader, so you can
okay.
determine how you want to lead this and what you would like your group to come up with, the 3 examples, how you'd like to do that.
Okay, well, since I was not prepared, I'm thinking that what we would want to do is to go ahead that I'm going to give an example of microaggression, let's say in a meeting, and then maybe let's say Sharon can give another example, and then Lewis can give an example, and then Teresa can go ahead and scribe those 3, and then we can work through those. All right, so I would say, okay, we're in the meeting, and we're all in this meeting together, our group here, and Sharon has an idea. So Sharon says, hey, I think that we should all take a backpack and we can go and sit out, you know, in the woods and, you know, just have our meeting there. And then Lewis pops up and says, well, you know, I don't think that that's a great idea. We're going to go to Leslie's house instead. And then because I'm the favorite in the group, the rest of the group says, well, I think that that's right. We're going to go to Leslie's house, and we totally disregard Sharon's point. I hope I did okay with that. So that's my example. I kept it.
Lewis, you want to go next, or would you like me to jump in?
No, you go ahead, Sharon. You're next.
Got it. So microaggression example in meetings. Sitting around a board table, talking. Somebody comes up with an idea. Discussion goes that direction, and then somebody chimes in. No, we interrupts. We've done that before. We're not going to do that anymore. It didn't work in the past. Let's figure out something else to do.
Okay. And then everybody sort of so you get no support for your original idea. So the person comes in and shuts you down. Is that what you're describing, that the person is shutting you down?
Correct.
And then go ahead.
Open mind conversation that just shuts down the conversation and ends it without any question of could I be wrong? Didn't work in the past, perhaps it works in the future.
Right, so no one is, so the leader at the table, so whoever is the pres, right, at this board meeting is not sort of helping to facilitate that everyone at the table is being heard. So then we're moving right along, maybe the idea falls flat or it doesn't get to a vote. So basically, there is one person in that conversation that is not being heard, and then there is no opportunity for that person. That person's respect is now minimized, and they sort of feel possibly marginalized in that conversation. So I guess we can go to the next example now. So Lewis, you're up.
Well, my example is not directly in real estate. It's in a past life where someone walks into a selling situation and is unkempt and their hair is in disarray and may not be the best dressed individual. And everyone shies away from that individual and doesn't want to talk with them. However, one individual does and ends up selling them $10,000 worth of equipment. So
Right. Time.
Okay.
So I apologize for interrupting you, Lewis. And I think, Teresa, did you get that thought from Lewis? Do you feel like it's developed enough?
Yes, past life selling situation, every one shies away from an individual who comes in.
And then they actually are a top producer.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
well,
Great.
actually it was relative to the client.
The client, yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. So now I'm going to ask for our group to participate, and I'm going to definitely need staff help to have raised hands and unmute mics. So, oh, how did we end up? Oh no, there we go. Hang on 1 second. Okay, so let me make sure that we're where we need to be. Sorry, I touched my clicker without meaning to. So I'm going to need staff help, and we're going to ask participants to, first we're going to have the scribe, Teresa, just share the chosen topic and the 3 examples that were given very quickly, and then we're going to give 3 minutes for members of the group who observed to give some feedback, other ideas, but we'll go ahead with the scribe first.
Okay, the leader was Leslie. The topic was number 2, microaggressions in meetings with clients or boards. Leslie gave an example of microaggression. There a meeting. In the meeting, Sharon has an idea of having a meeting in the woods with a backpack. Lewis objects, and the group moves to go with Leslie's home because she's the favorite, completely disregarding Sharon's idea. The second example was given by Sharon. Interruptions. You're in a board meeting, and she begins with an idea. Someone interrupts Sharon's to say that idea has not worked in the past without giving Sharon's original idea any relevance, and it does not. And they the idea did not work before, and so it probably won't work in the future. So Sharon's idea was completely disregarded. And the third example of microaggression was from Lewis, and it was a past life seller situation in where a client enters the room or whatever the event is. Every other agent shies away from that individual with the exception of one, and the client turns out to be a viable buyer.
Okay, thank you, Teresa. And thank you for your first round. And you see a group of questions up here. And this is for the entire class to think about. I'm not going to ask everyone to answer these points other than think about, did everyone in the group share ideas? Did anyone take over the conversation and not allow enough time for others to speak? And did anyone feel marginalized? These are all just observations, and we're going to practice. And part of these 3 exercises are not just to come up with the microaggressions and work through it, but to practice how to be more inclusive in meetings. So you, the 7 of you illustrated very well the process of how we start and what the typical situation is in meetings where people feel awkward, you're not sure what's expected of you, and you're just kind of feeling your way. Leslie, you did a great job for being put on the spot by your peers. And but I want you to think about these questions, and as we go into the next segment, consider ways that we can improve that. And I'm going to give you a couple tools to solve that. But first, we're going to open it up to the group, and we're going to do 3 minutes. And again, I'm hoping staff, I don't see staff on here because they're all disappeared. But if I can get someone Susan, to click on a raised hand, I'd love to open it up for 3 minutes to the rest of the group to see if they have other ideas they'd like to share for you to consider working on for the next segment in the question that was asked, which is examples of microaggressions in meetings or with clients. So if anyone wants to raise their hand, I've started the timer, and Susan will call you out, I guess is the only way, because I can't see any raised hands on my screen now.
Everyone has talking permitted, but it would be good if somebody could raise their hand so we're not all talking at once.
Thank you. Does anyone else have an idea for examples of microaggressions in meetings or in dealing with clients?
have a hand. I have one.
Okay,
I don't have a hand where I can raise my hand though.
that's okay.
Okay. One that I've seen is where the agent may be always deferring to a husband rather than including the wife in a conversation.
Excellent.
Can be a pretty big one.
Yeah, excellent.
Mhm.
Anyone else? Everyone in the class is welcome to let us know what you're thinking. Okay, I've got 2 participants with their hands raised. Rachel Weist, if you will unmute yourself.
I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, sometimes groups will have, there'll be the official leader, but then there's somebody who actually carries tremendous influence over the organization. So when a topic comes up, everybody sort of shyly turns to that the true leader to see how that person's going to come down on the issue before they actually will suggest anything or contribute.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rachel. Monique Edwards, if you want to, I'm going to unmute you and you can go ahead.
Hello.
Hi, Monique.
Hello. So a microaggression could be when you're in a meeting and you give your, let's just say you give a suggestion. The suggestion is not actually implemented or even addressed. You just gave the suggestion, but nothing came of it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Monique. Okay, anyone else? Got one more. Charles Christensen.
Yes, ma'am. So an example would be having a new member of a organization whose thoughts and opinions are not seriously considered because they're not tenured amongst the group.
Oh, great idea. That's great. It's also could be ageism, maybe somebody that's younger. Really good idea. Okay, so that was 3 minutes. It goes by very quickly. Thank you for participating and sharing some ideas. So now we have a few more ideas, and Teresa, you've been tracking them, correct? All right, so now we're going to go to the next segment. And this is hot potato. This time it's 5 minutes again. The leader role will shift, the chair or the leader, and you will choose one of the examples. So Teresa, you probably want to rush through, provide short answers and list all of them so that your group can choose one example and 3 solutions. So in this time around, the leader appoints who's going to speak first. That person must pass to the next person by name. And Teresa, you can help with names if somebody doesn't know who's spoken, so you might want to put a little check mark because 5 minutes goes really fast. The goal is to have everyone speak within the time frame, and the leader has to keep this conversation moving and should speak last. If you don't have an idea, you can pass, but it will have to come back to you before it goes to the leader. Does everybody feel like you understand this time around? Yes? Okay, great. All right, so we'll have our group choose a leader. I'm going to put 5 minutes on the clock, and let's see if this time around we can get everybody sharing. Okay, go.
Let's see, how about I choose Sharon as leader? Is that?
Works for me. Is Sharon good with that?
Sharon?
Sharon?
Sharon, do you accept?
I'm not seeing Sharon.
You're on mute.
There she is. Okay, great. So you're on mute, Sharon. Okay, there you go.
Sorry, yes, I accept.
Okay.
So I would like Larry to speak first, please.
Okay. Is there a particular topic that I need?
We're going to choose one of the examples and come up with 3 solutions. And Cher, could you qualify, are we choosing one of the examples of the 3 that we gave previously?
Teresa should probably choose to read all of them very quickly in case you prefer one of the ones that were raised by the larger group. So run through all of them very quickly. Your clock is ticking.
Let's see. I don't know if I wrote those down. Microaggressions. I don't think I wrote the 3 down. I just wrote the one that they chose before.
Okay, does anyone in the group remember the examples that were given by the rest of the group?
I remember Lewis's example of the client who was unkempt, and the person who went after that business, even though the person didn't present as a cleaned up professional, like white collar.
Okay,
Like
what about,
Oh, go ahead. I apologize to the group. I was thinking that the 3, not referring to the examples, but I was thinking about the 3 choices. I do have the examples. I'll run by real quickly.
Teresa, I'm going to interrupt you. Teresa, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Did you write down, there were also suggestions that were made by the bigger group. Did you write those down?
Yes.
Okay, so read through the 3 plus the ones that were raised by the rest of the group.
Okay. Rachel mentioned, she spoke about everyone looking to the unofficial meeting leader for a solution and a nod to in making a decision. Monique mentioned presenting at an issue and receiving no answer to a suggestion that was made. And Charles may mention new members' opinion may not be valued because they're not tenured.
Okay, and then will you read the other 3 that were brought up during the meeting?
Okay, Leslie brought up the example of microaggression of a member having an idea to have a meeting at a specific place with a backpack. Lewis, another member, objects, and then the group moves to the favorite in the group home, Leslie, disregarding Sharon's idea completely. And then Sharon came up with the microaggression example of an interruption. Someone interrupts her idea without giving Sharon's original idea any consideration by saying, oh, that idea didn't work before, so it won't work in the future. And then thirdly, Lewis gave the example of a client in a selling situation where everyone steps away or shies away from the individual that came into the room, and the client proves to be a viable buyer.
Okay. All right. So you're going to choose one of those, and your leader was appointed, so you're on.
Okay, perfect. So thank you, Teresa, for reviewing the list and clarifying. I think I'll address the point that Monique raised, because I think some of the other points also gravitate towards that, where a person presents an idea, but it's actually not recognized when that idea has been presented, if they're in a committee or group setting or something. And I think that also indicates maybe that their opinion is not valued, or that they're not being looked upon or being looked through because of their age or whatever, or ethnicity. So I think solutions to that would be for, first of all, to recognize the person when they speak, and to actually recognize them, not by just, okay, what you say, but recognize them formally. Yes, Leslie, your opinion is, your thought is this. Can you maybe expound upon that more? But recognize them, first of all, their humanity, that they do have a name, right? And to try to include them in the conversation.
Okay, pass to someone.
I'm going to pass.
Sorry, Sharon.
That's all right. Thank you, Barry. Thank you, Sharon.
and pass it.
Who would you like to pass to?
Yes, Lewis.
Thanks, Larry. One of the things that we didn't capture right there was Sharon brought up the fact early on about one of the biases was someone dealing with a client and in deference to the husband as opposed to the wife. And I think that's something that's common in our situation. Without asking questions, you don't know that. But going back to the original topic, Larry, that we had discussed, which was Monique's topic, and that is thanking the individual for bringing that to the attention of the group and for participating in that group. I think that's vitally important to make sure that they feel appreciated and welcomed into the group and being a part of that group. So I think that's an important part of it. Other conversations, discussions may be going on currently around such topics, and individuals may not be aware of that. But thanking them for being present and for participating and for asking those questions and bringing those to attention of the group, I think is a great way to at least acknowledge and have someone feel welcome.
Okay.
And so I pass to Audra.
Thank you, Lewis.
Oh my goodness. There's so much information here. I'm not really sure what to say. There's a lot of really good information. So what, could you tell me what the main question is, or what the main thing you want us to bring up when it's our turn? Sorry.
So and Teresa, I don't know if you want to speak to rereading that. And then Audra, with that example, if you just have some solutions that you'd like to mention, and really if you are fine with where we are, if you want to pass that on to somebody within this time period, you are welcome to do that. Your choice.
Thank you. I was thinking I do have a solution. I kept reflecting back on what Lewis had said about approaching a client that looked like they might not be good business. And I've had personal experience with that. Someone came in was just a walk-in in our office and looked like a kid, really. And I had been taught the day before by my firm to ask everyone, are you bringing cash to this transaction? Rather than saying something like, have you been pre-approved yet? Instead of saying that, when we start to talk about financing, say, are you a cash buyer? And that's what came out of my mouth. And it turns out this kid was, and he really wasn't a kid. He was an athlete, and he was a cash buyer. So that, I think good training and role play and practicing treating people, as I think looked at before when Sher was teaching, having the same model of dealing with people and not bringing your preconceived notions to the table about what they look like or what you think they're bringing, is really good training, to just have a way you deal with people that treats everyone the same.
Okay, great. So we have just landed at 5 minutes, and so we'll stop the time, and we're going to go back to the same questions that we had before. So just think about this for a minute. First, if Teresa, you would share the ideas that came up for solution, what the topic was, and you didn't end up with the top 3 ideas, but I think you had 3 speakers. So
yes, the idea that we had 3 speakers. Larry spoke first, and then Audra, and Larry spoke first, Lewis second, and then Audra. And Larry started off with discussing a point that Monique made, addressing a member that has a suggestion but seems to be ignored, and there's no resolution or no communication regarding the suggestion. And Larry first addressed that concern, and his solution was to include the member in the conversation. And then Lewis responded with, in the beginning, he addressed the comment regarding the husband always addressing the wife in regards to making decisions. And then Lewis expounded on, in response to Larry's solution, thanking the individual for participating, making the member feel welcome. And then Audra, with her solution, she spoke to the solution in regards to Lewis' example of shying away away from a client, and her solution would be training, role playing in advance of meeting with clients, and having the same model of when you're dealing with individuals.
Okay. All right. Now we're going to open it back up to the group, and we're going to start with those 3 questions again. Did changing the process allow for everyone to speak and share? In this instance, it did not, because ideas took longer to formulate, and this is all part of the practice. The goal is not perfection, it's to become aware. If the goal for the group is that everyone speaks within 5 minutes, including having Teresa give the description, then everybody has to be succinct, maybe jot down your ideas and pass it quickly. The leader, I interrupted Sharon's leadership. You did a beautiful job once I got out of your way. So I think that everybody moved along. The ideas in 5 minutes. With Teresa, it needs about a minute. So that gives everyone else 30 seconds to speak, just to give you an idea of what that's like. And in this instance, did anyone feel marginalized? Well, 3 of your members didn't get a chance to speak. And it's important, obviously, in a typical meeting, you would have a lot longer than 5 minutes to get 6 people expressing an opinion. But in this experience, it's how do you include everyone? And it's important, I think, for the rest of the group to see everyone has a responsibility for being inclusive, because Sharon couldn't control how long each of the people spoke. And really, you didn't speak that long. It was, 30, 45 seconds a piece, which is very short in real meeting time, as we all know. But in this exercise, the challenge for you is to get your thought out, pass it along quickly, keep it under 30 seconds so that you're seeing how you can control, because you're choosing who speaks next, you're choosing how long to speak. And the inspiration here is, how are you as a member of the group helping to facilitate that movement? So does everybody see the opportunity here to practice this?
Yeah.
And again, it's just observational. So we're going to open up to the group and just get some feedback on the ideas. If anyone wants to raise their hand, let me see if I can see. And just 2 or 3 minutes, get a chance to, I'm not seeing my little group. Let's see. Okay, so now I can see my participants. And I've got Karen has her hand up. Karen, what would you like to share?
I have a question. Like, if a potential client comes up to you, or potential customer comes up to you wanting to look for a house, what's the best way to ask if they have their pre-approval letter from a lender without sounding like I don't want to take you on if you don't have one? Because I mean, who wants to do a bunch of work finding a house and then find out that they can't afford the house that they wanted and needed all this work?
Okay, great question, and we will address that. And I'll talk to the group about that. Does anybody else have any feedback before I go back to the group for the last segment of this? Rick Ward?
Yeah, hi, Cher. Thank you for that.
Hi.
I do have a question with this last exercise. So would it have been managed better if Sharon had said, okay, let's keep your ideas, quick and concise, because we're all trying to get everybody to speak? Would that be a better way to have moved that exercise through?
Yes, if this had been, if they had been prepared in advance and knew, because I think from an observation standpoint, you're absolutely correct, and helping them each see themselves as leaders, and of course Sharon as a facilitator, and keeping things moving without, it's kind of hindsight. So now whoever leads next is going to have that empowerment and knowledge. So absolutely, you're right. And this is what the process is leading to, is how do we become more inclusive by making sure that we create ground rules that make everyone feel a part of the process? And how do we avoid leaving anyone out? And in this instance, I'm manufacturing a way to leave people out purposefully because it's short. And the challenge, of course, in real meetings is that you've got an agenda, you're trying to get through certain things by a certain time, and it's very easy to overlook unless we spend time focused on how am I going to be inclusive and how am I, as a member of this group at the table, how am I going to help that leader facilitate that? How do I do my part? And how do I not microaggress other people, but also create opportunity for others to speak? So great question, and it is the right solution. And I think they'll illustrate this beautifully their third time around. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you for the exercise.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so we're back for our third segment. And let me get everybody back on the screen. I've lost all my video people. There you are. Okay, so does everyone feel a little bit more clear now that you've gone through a couple versions of this? The first thing I want to make sure you're aware of is that you're doing it right, and that this is, had you gotten it perfectly the first time around and not illustrated, then I wouldn't have needed to do the other two exercises, and my whole hour would have been, you know, just having conversations. So you've done it beautifully, and I'm going to challenge you on this third piece. You're going to have 7 minutes. Someone else is going to lead, and you're going to choose your best solution, anything that you like, and then you're going to create an actionable solution. As a group, each of you will need to, whatever idea is selected, that person is going to restate their idea. Then they're going to pass it so that each person will add to that idea, and then you guys will ultimately create an actionable solution. And I am going to address the question of how to treat all clients the same when we're done. So that question doesn't need to be a part of your project. So once everyone has shared, Scribe is going to read through the piled up idea, and your group will refine to one statement or short paragraph, keeping in mind what your goal is. If this, then this. If someone's idea is not respected or valued, then what is the action step or steps? Because it can be a running sentence. It just doesn't have to be a short piece, but it needs to be clear, actionable, something that everyone watching could take away and say, if this happens, this is what I could do. So by nod of heads, does everybody agree with the exercise, that you understand the exercise? No heads are nodding.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know.
Okay, so we're going to give you 7 minutes to do this so you can really pull this idea together, do the math about how much time each of you have to speak. Teresa is going to be responsible for sharing all the little tidbits, maybe just in summary, 2 or 3 words that gives the idea of each. And by a show of hands, you guys need to choose which one. You're going to have to choose a leader who can orchestrate this. And you will come up with if this, then this. And I'm going to start you with 7 minutes on the clock, including Teresa's time. And go.
Can I ask a clarifying question, Cher?
Sure.
Okay, so the actionable solution to what we just discussed in the last exercise, I think that's where I'm getting confused.
So you had a bunch of ideas about solutions. There were several solutions. Teresa's going to read them. Okay. And then you are going to choose one as a group, and that person whose idea it was is going to restate it. and then
okay.
everybody, and pass it along so people can add to it.
Okay,
So I'll start your time again.
okay, perfect.
Okay, the solutions were having a meeting, considering someone's idea of having a meeting in the woods without disregarding an idea or choosing a favorite, not interrupting someone to say that the idea doesn't work because it hasn't worked in the past, to not disregard a consumer or buyer or a client on their purchasing ability, to be inclusive with someone, a member that has a solution that may bring it up, you know, to a member of our association, to also provide answers to suggestions and making someone feel inclusive, valuing a new member's opinion and not ignoring them just because they're not tenured, and also include everyone that needs to be, not looking to one person to be the leader and provide a solution for everyone else in the meeting that may be hesitant about communicating their idea.
Okay. I know we haven't chosen the leader yet, but I was wondering if the comment about the new member feeling respected in an environment where, you know, they're coming in firsthand might be a good one to take a look at. That would just be my suggestion for conversation. And then I'd recommend Denise, is it Liz Dow?
Yes.
As our leader?
Okay, so I'm the leader, and Cher, I just for clarification, do I start with a solution and then move on to the next person for another solution?
No, whose idea was it that Leslie brought up?
I can't remember who that was.
I think it was
Charles Christensen.
Okay, so who's going to speak for Charles Christensen and start the idea?
I could do that. Should I do that as the leader and then explain what the scenario is and then pass it on to somebody else? Is that how this will work?
Yes, the problem is X. If this happens, then what's your solution?
Okay. So so the scenario is there's a group meeting. Everyone's meeting in the conference room. There's a new agent who just joined the office, and they're coming into the meeting. Everybody else pretty much knows each other. Am I doing this correctly? So this person is already somewhat being marginalized because they don't know anyone else. So what do we do to make sure that that person is not marginalized, or there's no microaggressions against them? Is that what you mean? I can start with an example of what to do if that's what we should be doing.
Okay.
Okay, so the first thing would be is for someone in the group to introduce this new agent and ask this person to tell a little bit about themselves so that people can get connected with them. So I will pass it on to Larry.
Okay. I'm sorry. If you can you pass it past maybe, because I got distracted, to be honest.
Sure. Why don't I pass it to Leslie?
Thank you.
Oh, right. Well, okay, so we have a new person in the group who hasn't yet been introduced. So my solution would be to, as Denise has said, is to acclimate them first, give them a warm welcome, and to let them know that we're happy to have them be part of the meeting, and to make sure that they're introduced to the rest of the team, and to just give them that assurance that they're welcome. So that's how I would start out. And then also, you know, let them know that I'm available later for any kinds of questions, or if they're not clear about what's going to happen, or maybe I may even take a few moments to say, here's what's going to happen today, you know, here's the agenda, or, you know, did you meet John as the chair or whatever, so that way they have some understanding of about what's going to happen next. So I would move now to pass that to Sharon.
Thank you, Leslie. I would also suggest that we go around with this group and we each tell something about ourselves so that person can also learn something about the whole group. I'd like to now pass that to Louis.
Thank you, Sharon. If that happens and we now know each other, at least have some feeling of who each other are, and a discussion is taking place perhaps with regard to training, make sure that we incorporate this individual and get their thoughts on what they might consider a good suggestion to continue with the proper handling of a client, or proper dealing with a client, or proper answering of a client's question. And I pass it back to Audra, since you're my favorite, see?
Oh, thank you. I think it would be a good idea, you know, to make sure we ask members who are introverted what they think. I tend to speak a lot, and I really have to like dial it back some to make sure like I don't take too much time. So it really is helpful to me when someone leading a meeting will turn to other people and say, you know, well, we've heard from Audra, you know, let's hear what she thinks. So, you know, if members are on a board and they're comfortable being called out, you know, you can say that. And, you know, and also as with new members, I think it's really helpful when somebody is new and you're introducing them to the group, and maybe you haven't had time to have a little social or mixer where you get to know each other. Perhaps you can say, you know, well, this is Lisa. In a past life, she was a conflict resolution manager. You know, so I think she's going to bring some great skills to the group. So you can maybe give somebody, if you don't have time to, it's great to have time to introduce yourselves and share something about yourself. But if you're short on time and somebody's new, you can, you know, drop in a little bit of information.
Okay. So I'm going to thank you, Audra, for illustrating my worst challenge or best challenge, depending on how it is. You're a natural teacher and you love sharing information, and that's obvious. And I think for a lot of leaders, it is always going to be a challenge to say less and to become very succinct. And anyone who is watching this, I really encourage you, if you find that you have a challenge in cutting off or you're talking more than other people, this is not a negative. That was a double negative, but I'm going to say this is not a negative. You have a desire to serve and teach and give. And there may be some, like in my own situation, there's a validation. I've learned this, therefore I want everybody to know it, and I want to be validated that this is helpful to them, and I want to save them time. And so the motives can be very good. At the same time, as leaders, our role is to lift people up, and this is whether they are our clients or whether they are our peers or whether they are new agents coming in. And I love that this is a topic. I will tell you, I've taught this about 30 times now. This is the first time that any group has ever talked about new and emerging agents and members who are not being valued or respected or felt welcome to share their ideas, or if they do share, they're not being acknowledged. So I really love that this group has noted that and considers it important. So kudos to you for that. Y'all did an amazing job. This is a difficult thing to do, isn't it? You know, you're put on the spot, you're uncomfortable, but nothing bad happened. Nobody died, nobody lost a limb. Everybody's dignity remained intact, although I usually say dignity is highly overrated. And if you're going to learn to be inclusive, it's really about the process. You will naturally become more inclusive. And the questions that you chose to focus on show that that is in your heart, and that's actually already part of your association culture because it was brought up by different people who did it without prompting. So I think it's a very interesting piece of information about Raleigh Regional Association of Realtors that you can be proud of.
Yeah.
So when we talk about this, we've gone over time, and I know we had a little bit of technical difficulty, so I'm going to wrap this up, and we're not going to finish the idea because I think there's enough meat there that everyone listening can take something away from it, and you all have contributed to that, and I really appreciate it, and I hope the members of the group did. And we're going to ask everybody again. In this case, Larry did pass, but we did hear from everyone in the group, so they did a lot better. And they needed more time initially because Teresa had to give more detail and there were a few questions that needed to be answered. So in this time around, did the discussion, and I'm going to ask the members of the group, did it feel constructive to you? Did you feel that you were creating a constructive discussion? Yes or no? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Did anybody go ahead?
Even though I passed, I still felt I was kind of formulating my ideas as the discussions kind of went around, right? So I think that was just amazing how that worked, right? And I was ready to jump right in, and then time ran out, right? So
okay.
it did make me feel more inclusive.
Good.
I wish it could have gone a little bit quicker so more people could get in and talk. But.
Yeah, and I think that comes with practice and a motive by everyone. And again, as we learn to be more succinct, to write our ideas down, to listen and see if anyone else, and again, if we're nurturing future leaders, then it's really important that we speak last. And if the idea is already there and we can't add to it, we don't need to say anything because it's already been accomplished. If there's an unintended consequence, it's important to bring that up while still recognizing the value of the idea. This is a great idea. I would ask the question, here's an unintended consequence that could happen. Is there a way to prevent that? Or do we need to rethink the idea unless everyone's okay with this consequence? So that kind of conversation. Karen, I see your hand raised. I'll come to you.
I do have one idea, maybe for future webinars. Maybe people could take better use of the chat function. Say not everybody has speaking time, but maybe everybody could write theirs in.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Yeah, we when we have a class where there's CE, it functions a little bit differently because everyone has to participate and there's a proctor who's pulling all those questions. So it's a little bit different today, and I really appreciate you pointing that out. And I see two other hands raised. Okay, Karen's done. Okay, two hands, let me see. Lewis and then Leslie.
Yeah, the thing that I think was important that we can take away from this is, in order to get the facts straight, we had to listen. And if we didn't listen, we missed something. And I know as we were going through, we actually missed some of the events that people thought were important to have this discussion. So listening is an integral part. And even though sometimes we may be processing what we're hearing, listening is the old adage, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a really good reason.
Excellent. Thank you, Lewis.
I like it.
Yeah, Leslie Williams.
Yes, I wanted to make the comment that I think when we started the exercise that based on, in my mind, I was really focused on, and whether you want to call that, I don't know if it's an unconscious bias about people being heard. So even, when you're leading a group or you're leading a meeting and the discussion is getting off course, you want to allow individuals to express their ideas, and you want to do that respectfully, but then there is that middle ground where you're maintaining control of the direction of the conversation. So I think for me, that what I perceived about this whole idea was that while we recognize that maybe we could have said, hey, we only have 5 minutes to each person, but while folks were in mid-conversation, it just was uncomfortable to say, hey, you're going over time. So I think the fact that we had that information from you about how to respect people, how to honor them, how to let them be supported in their views, I think limited our ability to use our judgment in that area. Not that we didn't recognize that we were under time, but we did not want to disrespect anyone. So I think that unconscious bias was set, like we were, like I felt like I was worried. I can't say we, I don't know about how anyone else felt.
This is really a good point. I'm glad you brought it up, and I think it's vital for me to share this. For the people that I interrupted, did it crush your spirit in any way? Okay, the reason that it shouldn't, and of course we all have, when I say should or shouldn't, the reality is some people will be hurt because it's in their DNA. But what happened was, Leslie, I set an explanation and an expectation up front that I was going to interrupt at the time, so that there was nothing personal. It was expected. Nobody was watching a clock, so they didn't know when it was going to happen. It could have happened to anyone. And it is setting expectations. So for example, if your meeting is on a certain topic and you've got an agenda, and Lewis could probably speak to this ad nauseum, people always want to add things to an agenda that wasn't brought to the leader's attention prior to the meeting. So there is a space called new business where the leader of that meeting would say, is there any new business? So let's say, for example, Leslie, that someone does go off topic and you are the leader, you could say, this is a great idea. Right now we're talking about this on the agenda. I'm going to move that to new business. And if we have time, would you please bring that up again? So you've acknowledged what they had to say. You've let them know that it's off topic and that you're going to stay on point for the benefit of everyone at the table, and that you are going to put it in new business. So if there is time, it will be addressed. And if not, it'll be on a future meeting. So does that's how you would handle it. So in this situation, you really didn't have enough time to do that, and the leader wasn't prepared to do that, and it really wasn't part of the exercise. There are so many layers to what can be accomplished when you're practicing meetings and learning bias. But what you brought up is really important. And when people gaslight or when they take things off topic and twist it, this is a way to bring it back, is to simply say, this was the topic. Today I'm late. We're not going to talk about the 30 times I've been late in my life. We're just going to focus on what we're talking about, right? Yeah. So, and again, it's non-confrontational. It's just, can we speak to the topic at hand, and we can address other things at the appropriate time. And that's key. And you can do that as a member of the group. You could say, Teresa could have said, oh, you guys were getting off topic. The actual topic we're on is this, to help get everyone back. The leader of the group could have done that as well. So there are ways to do it that are constructive and inclusive while respecting someone's humanity, but keeping people on track. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. And we're way over time. So I'm going to address the one question. There are some quotes up here everybody can read, but the question of how do you address a client and ask one for driver's license or proof of lender letter if you have a policy that's consistent, and if for your protection, you're always going to know who you're dealing with, and that they have been pre-qualified. Number one, to save time. You don't want to show property to someone when you don't know what they can afford. And two, you want to know who you're dealing with and that they are legitimately who they say they are. We've certainly seen instances where people have been misled and been harmed as a result. So it is your responsibility to protect yourself and your business time, number one. But number two, if you have a policy and maybe it's a single sheet of paper that says, here's what we do in order to get you prepared to look at homes. If you call me about a particular home, I would like to show it to you. I can get you pre-qualified. Here are 3 lenders you could call right now. Can I help you? I'll wait, and then we'll go look at the property together. So there are ways to do it if they're a walk-in. If it's somebody calling you, you could certainly ask, have you been pre-qualified or will you need help with that? And then you start from there and do a counseling appointment in an office or a safe place, a coffee shop, whatever you feel comfortable with, or do a Zoom if you don't meet people in person. But hopefully that's helpful to you. Again, consistency with every single person, even if you think they're a mega billionaire, if they say they're paying all cash, the next question would be, do you have proof of funds? Because we'll need that to go with your package, and it's our policy to verify the financing and the source, because I won't know how to write your offer otherwise. So coming up with your own way of addressing that, but treating everyone the same, no matter what they say, what they look like, what ethnicity, age, and as Lewis pointed out, appearances can be very deceiving. So I'm going to, if there's any final questions, otherwise I appreciate y'all for staying late. I know we lost a few people due to previous commitments. Thank you so much to this team. My little test market group here who were so willing to be examples of how to have an inclusive culture. I hope you've enjoyed this today and you've gotten some tools you can use, and that this will make a difference in your daily business lives and community.
Thank you, Chair, for being a part.
Thank you very much, Sher. This has been outstanding. I think you mentioned the key word here, and that is tools, right? Because this is a, this is tools and techniques, right? That we all need to sometimes relearn, right? And sometimes to learn again, learn anew on how we do make people feel inclusive, et cetera, in different meeting environments or whatever. So thank you, Sher. I really appreciate this. It's amazing.
Thank you.